This utopia was supposed to be the future of cities. Broadacre City. A city of organic architecture, of freedom. A city where peace will break out instead of war, designed by the greatest American architect of the 20th century.
Architect Frank Lloyd Wright.
I've been obsessed with this plan for a couple of years now. You see, I have visited Frank Lloyd Wright's homes. I visited his offices, and now I want to dig into his utopia. And I'm trying to figure out, what was he thinking? This plan was supposed to be architecture for freedom and democracy. But this multi-decade project, it mixes these bizarre ideas about isolation and driving and beautiful ambitions for education and democracy. I want to use this specific plan to try to understand why we bother designing utopias. I called one of my favorite thinkers about architecture. I'm kind of confounded by this, and I need your help. And I think I figured something out. This city is a masterpiece and a disaster, a utopia and a dystopia, but it is also a tool. It is a lens on a genius, but it is also a way to understand why we design utopias in the first place. Broadacre City was a template, 4 miles square. It could show up anywhere in the country to reinvent the city. That country would, in turn, become a new Usonia under these ideals. The goal was a decentralized city. Instead of a big hub at the middle, you would have a bunch of little plots of land and resources scattered across the entire city bounds. It had stated values, like no tall buildings for a new freedom, but you really see it in the plan.
You can see decentralization everywhere now.
When I started doing architecture videos a couple years ago, I had no idea how to think about it. And so I turned to Stuart Hicks's YouTube channel to kind of unlock how this stuff worked. Now, he is a professor, he's an architect, he's a YouTuber. He's also somebody who I have come to trust just as a viewer to have really good insights into what's going on in the minds of different architects. So I gave him a call to try to figure out what was going on with Broadacre City. Like, where does your mind go in the beginning of it?
People like Frank Lloyd Wright were coming out of an era in the 1800s where architecture was about like what style you were using, or like which elements from some other building from the past you would pull into a building. And all of a sudden, architecture was sort of emboldened to think about how you are making the world.
I want to give you a tour of this city so you can understand exactly how unusual it was. The county seat was this skyscraper in the middle of nowhere, and it overlooked all these 1-acre plots of land that make up the city. I feel like you can really see on the 3D model just how much this is more like the country than a city or a suburb that we imagine today. Even in this plan, there were still class divides, commodious dwellings, apartment houses, and homes for workers. And there were also showcases of machine-age luxury, like the house on the Mesa. Yes, his democratic utopia had one house with a covered pool. All right, let's put me in the city here. All right, so I thought I'd pretend to be one of the little people in Broadacre City, just with a humble little plot of land, because I'm fascinated by this issue of class in a utopia, and there's a lot to get into that would kind of derail this video. So every time I put out a video, I also put out a newsletter. It is free to subscribe to. It's on Patreon, and this week, my article focuses on that, the idea of class in this place that could be classless, but Frank Lloyd Wright didn't want it that way. I think it's a really interesting story, and it includes, a sick mansion. So that's always a plus. You can go on there. It's totally free to join. I'm just telling you this now because there's almost 1,000 subscribers. It's a great way for you to know whenever a new video comes out, get that extra info. And if I ever add anything more to Patreon in the future, you will be the first to know. So thanks for checking that out. I want to actually stop the tour here, though, because it kind of gets to the heart of the weird conflict in this utopia. He's got these weird ideas for how a city should be organized, and they are right next to these amazing designs for specific buildings in those cities. In his later book, The Living City, Wright presents these amazing drawings of the buildings he's known for, like this living room or this astonishing roadside market, where a grove of protected trees sits next to an incredible market. People get to buy goods grown in the Broadacre community. There's a garden, a restaurant, and a beauty parlor. I'm looking at the plans for Broadacre, and I'm like, well, this sounds awful. A 20-minute drive everywhere? Like, this is hell on earth. And then I turn the page, and there's a drawing of like a school that looks like the sickest school I've ever seen, you know, or whatever.
You know, I think of it as like vertical integration for an architect. You're designing this like utopia city, and he's also designing furniture. So he's like doing every scale that he can.
The plan starts to break down as a plan. Major roads have been pushed to the side of the plan. Broadacre somehow has an aquarium, a zoo, an arboretum. And even if these are just big ideas, they're kind of weird ones for a small city. It's got baseball stadiums, and giant structures emerge like pyramids out of all this nothingness. And this tells us something about utopias. These aren't practical plans. So how could a genius think that this was a good idea? Le Corbusier was a famous Swiss-French architect and contemporary of Wright's, who's well known for his own utopian fantasies and arguable dystopias. But I'm talking about him here because I loved his book, The City of Tomorrow. It helped me figure out another reason we might design utopias as a coping mechanism for the ways that a society has changed. In it, he points out that the great city is a new event with a rapidly growing population. Here's his chart of the increase in mechanical transport in France, and he even has a chart of car production in the United States. Just look at that line. At this period in time, the 1920s, 1930s, it had become clear that cars were kind of this world-changing thing, and the utopians were using their ideal cities to grapple with that change. The same way that we might be trying to figure out how to live with our phones around all the time today, or AI possibly changing the world in the future. Many utopians in the time were grappling with cars. In Magic Motorways, Norman Belgetti's proposed elevated pedways, while in Futuramas, traffic carved through buildings. Le Corbusier had a similar obsession with traffic plans. This explains the spread out nature of Wright's Broadacre. He was trying to make car life part of the good life, even though he wasn't necessarily sympathetic to cars.
What is supposed to be the growth of the city is really going to be finally the death of the city.
He made plans like this highway, which could keep traffic continuously flowing, thanks to the automatic overpass that you can see here. Traffic would never have to stop or slow you down. And when you needed gas, it would be beautiful. As crazy as it seems, Wright actually did build a gas station in Minnesota.
I think the gas station was an agent of decentralization.
This wasn't the pragmatic car planning that the United States Federal Housing Administration would later use to shape roads and subdivisions, but a fantastical one. Wright hated traffic and that damned smoke in the city. His plan was pitched as a way to solve the problems of civilization, because Wright believed the modern city was doomed by the forces that built it: electricity, automobiles, wireless, and transportation. So his city would provide a new freedom for living in America, where those innovations were harnessed. Light pollution would be curbed, wires would disappear, no traffic problem would exist. Administration would be done through the radio. To us, Broadacre looks like a bizarrely overdeveloped exurb, but to Wright, it looked like a way to curb the excesses of cars and electricity. But Stewart had a more optimistic take, and I think there's evidence for it.
I don't think it was forced on these really future forward thinking architects. They were very eager to figure out how it would impact what they'd be designing toward. Their building needs to anticipate 10, 20, 30, 100 years from now. And so looking at this kind of cutting edge technology like an automobile and imagining what that future of that is fundamental for people like Frank Lloyd Wright to be able to create a building that would participate and continue to participate in the world.
And there, that point that you're making rhymes really well with all the sort of airspace that is allocated in all these utopian plans at the same time.
It's better to plan for it than it is to let it take place as the cities themselves grew.
Wright's plans for Broadacre were filled with fanciful drawings like these, and even sketches of how a car might look more beautiful. Here's another angle. Okay, what am I supposed to do now? Do I say what the car actually looks like? I can't ignore it. Do I ignore what the car looks like? No, I can't do that. I'm a father, I'm a family man. Maybe it's like engagement bait, have them name the car, comments, no. Now the comments are gonna be overrun with car names from that. Like something about Freud, something about a cigar being a cigar. A car is not just a cigar. Maybe just say looks good and it's kind of looks pretty. That'll be offensive. Looks good. Let's move on. Broadacre City was less of a design guide and more a form of coping with the present and seizing the future. But I think that these utopias have other reasons to exist. The utopia isn't just about the utopia. It's about the people making it. Did he think he was able to plan a city because he was so good at doing this other stuff? I mean, I'm just trying to
I see lots of different kinds of value for things like Broadacre City for an architect to create. One being, yes, that's how I want the world to be, but it's also a kind of marketing tool. Like there's other thing, like, I don't know if it's cynical to see it in those ways, but I sometimes question, at least at a certain stage, there's lots of architects that are creating imaginary worlds that aren't necessarily worlds that they want to see come to fruition.
I felt so naive hearing Stuart saying this, but it's obvious now in retrospect. Of course, this was a way for Wright to market himself and his studio and also his worldview. He made his model in the midst of the Depression, giving his studio attention in a desperate economic time. Throughout his writing, he makes sure to connect it to the organic architecture that he is known for. He also included a Taliesin equivalent in the plan. Taliesin was the name of his school and studio. This group made Broadacre. Taliesin wasn't necessary to a utopia, but it was very necessary to Frank Lloyd Wright. And this is crucial to me. When World War II starts, years after he's unveiled this plan, he hustles. He starts pitching it as a solution to World War II's problems, because it's a way for him to get the idea out there again. He says that his city would make it tough for bombers. And how would he rebuild London? Well, he'd make something like Broadacre City. But I think there's something deeper than marketing going on too. Not just a pitch, but maybe a portrait. He sees this isolation of elements and the centrality of education and the paramount idea of democracy and sort of self-made man as being the perfect city. Not necessarily because he's that concerned with other Americans necessarily, but it's like a beautiful way to sculpt himself.
He used to call people who are taller than him a waste of space. And his ceilings are notoriously low because, they're perfect for his size because he was a relatively short person. And it's not for everyone. And I think you're right that he was constructing the world for himself in a certain way, or this kind of almost like velvet-lined violin case that would be the world that would be able to accept his shape.
This city is, in a way, Frank Lloyd Wright. Wright sympathized with some aspects of American fascism. And scum and slum, it stings of that idea. So does the literal elevation of the elites, the isolation of the masses. The city is, in a way, Frank Lloyd Wright, in good ways and bad ways. But he also had a spiritual interest without creed and a centrality that he placed on education. He wanted a space for baseball and baths, and he had vineyards for fruit that could be picked, but might take a while to find its purpose.
What do you consider is your most satisfactory achievement?
Oh, my dear boy. The next one, of course. The next building I build.
I saw utopias as these literal-minded plans for the future, but they are something much bigger than that. Now I see them as all these things, as a vessel for discovery. Because maybe you can't know who you want yourself to be until you imagine it. Hey, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for being here and for watching. I have all the sources linked in the description. Because this was focused on Broadacre City as a lens for utopias, there was a lot of writing that really helped me unlock how to think about this. So I hope you'll check out some of those papers in the description. Some of the writing is actually pretty insightful and poetic, more so than the kind of drier academic stuff that I normally get into. I also really want to thank the people who helped me out for this video. Stuart is an obvious one. I'm a huge fanboy, so it was awesome to get to talk to him. Check out his channel about architecture if you haven't in the past. I know that I am a bell on, person when it comes to his uploads. I want to thank the designers who helped me kind of upgrade that 3D model of Broadacre City. They're listed in the credits here. Without their work, that wouldn't exist. So it's really cool that they were able to help me with that. And otherwise, I just want to thank you for being here. I want to know, what do you think I missed about utopias? What perspective did I miss? I would love to just get your opinion on that. Do you think the utopias can serve a purpose? Are they just idle speculation? I want to know. Otherwise, that's it for this one. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the future.